Okay, other questions? I know I saw some hands. Yeah.
Well, I want to say, first of all, my 7th grade math teacher was fabulous. He's still my favorite teacher. But I was wondering about, especially at the introductory undergrad level, you know, freshman, sophomore year, physics, calculus, bio, and chem also happen to be what all the majors take. And I know that at my college, I mean, it was purposefully tailored to be a cattle call type class that weeded out those people who weren't going to succeed. I think that also tended towards sort of male-oriented, you know, incentives. And I'm wondering if there's a way, because to some extent you do need to, everybody wants to be pre-med when they go into college, and you need to get people out who don't actually want to be pre-med. But how do you change the culture so that women who really do want to succeed in the sciences and maths actually do stick with it?
Actually, you need to know what the culture is first, right? That's the biggest part of the problem, is that, you know, we mentioned a little bit, NASA's been doing Title IX reviews, and they've been doing 2 a year for the last 4 years. And one of the most interesting things that NASA is finding when they're going into these educational institutions is that the educational institutions themselves aren't looking at what's going on. So how did we find the problem? Well, somebody actually looked at our data, saw that we had this lousy retention rate, and we went in and fixed it. But if you don't look, you're not going to find it. And so I think that's a big part of it, is you have to start looking for those pressure points. And on some level, you're right. If you're not going to make it in pre-med, if you're not going to get to med school, get out early and find another path. But we shouldn't be scaring you off, and we shouldn't be deciding, we should be educating you as to what your opportunities are. So yeah, but you have to look at what's going on, and you have to be willing to do that. And not a whole lot of schools are doing that right now.
Lisa, can I add something to that? Tufts University has very good numbers attracting and retaining women in engineering. The percentage in some years actually goes up. I mean, percentage-wise. What do? They get rid of these killer courses to begin with for women. I don't know what life was like with you, but when I faced like a physics course in college, you know, my blood pressure was high, my mood was, I was nervous. And so what Tufts did is it said, if we want to attract bright, creative minds, how do we do it? And they skipped all those entry courses the first year. They formed groups of women who worked on socially relevant engineering projects. They worked together. At the end of the year, they saw a product. They had collaboration. They had allies. And the second year, when they had purpose and understanding, they took those tougher courses. And when I think of neuroplasticity, what were they doing to their brain to change that? Because for me, there was nothing in those courses but win or lose, those intro courses. But if I have purpose, then there's so much more going on for me to do well in those courses. So we could change that structure. We don't have to have killer courses.
That's actually a really good point. One of the things that AAUW is doing is something called the National Girls Collaborative Program, and we have some folks here who have worked with that program that can answer even more questions, but the whole goal can even be making sure that we get girls into, and underrepresented minorities, into science after-school programs, hands-on things where they really see how they can help people, how they can change things for the better, how they can solve problems that they want to try and address, so that it's not an abstract engineering kind of concept or a science kind of concept. It's literally how I apply those principles to make the world around me better. And when you do that, and it's hands-on, you have a lot more retention with girls, a lot more interest in the science fields. That's another policy area, by the way, that you all can be thinking of. Obviously, No Child Left Behind is going to be on the reauthorization block, and the 21st Century After-School programs that are part of that right now have as an option to do STEM programming. Should it just be an option? Or do we want to have those 21st century after-school programs be required to do some kind of STEM programming so that we can introduce kids at an early level, particularly girls, at a time when they're starting to become less interested? Girls are okay in elementary school. Then they hit puberty, and all of a sudden social pressures and parental pressures and societal expectations come into play in terms of what kind of field they should choose, right? And is science cool? I mean, who does science, right? The nerds do science, right? You think about how you were when you were 13 years old and what kind of pressures you faced. It is very similar today. In fact, probably even worse with other things coming into play. And so part of what we want to do is have positive programming that will show them not only that it's something that they can do, but that appeals to, in some respects, girls' nature to want to help and problem solve and be interactive in terms of how they do science. So again, as a policy measure, thinking about No Child Left Behind, how we reauthorize that. Yes, we've got America's Competes, and we're doing stuff with the teachers. But we need those after-school programs, and we need more training for guidance counselors as well, so that they're not being stereotypical in terms of how they're pushing people into various career paths as well. Other folks want to bring in on that? I think actually it's time for us to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I especially want to thank Tracy Sherman, my lobbying partner at AAUW, for putting this briefing together. Many of you know her and get emails from her, and she is just absolutely a field marshal general when it comes to putting briefings together. So I hope you enjoyed it. Take sandwiches with you back to the offices, and make friends with your colleagues, and bring them food and brownies. And remember, AAUW, the National Women's Law Center, SWE, David Sadker, and the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education are here to answer your questions and to be your partners moving forward as we look at legislative solutions to addressing these issues. Thank you so much for coming today.